Today we're doing a flip kit and a color change on the FZ09 and MT09 cluster. First, let's see what comes in the package from Colorclusterz. We've got our packing slip, and inside of that we find the instructions printed out and nicely illustrated. Inside of the folded instructions we've got our pre-cut color change film. This one is going to have a blue tint, of course. And lastly we have the pre-cut polarizing film set to flip the black and white display. Now, polarizing film is already on the display, and it's what makes the display visible to the naked eye. And depending on the rotation of the film when it's applied, you can get different looks from the display. Step 1, of course, is to remove any windscreen you may have on your motorcycle. And next up, we need to remove the small cover behind the display with one screw using a 4mm hex bit. Now remove the 3 screws holding the cluster to its mounting bracket using the same 4mm hex bit. The bottom screw is a bit tight depending on the size of your bit. With the screws out, give it a little bit of a wiggle to remove the cluster from its rubber mount. Then work the rubber weather connector away from the cluster and press the release tab on the harness connection. Now the fun part begins. We need to remove the 7 screws holding the halves of the cluster assembly together. Grab your appropriately sized Phillips screwdriver and get to work. And with the screws out, gently work the 2 covers apart. Lift the back cover off to reveal the PCB. And don't worry about removing the 2 screws found in here. There won't be a need to separate the PCB from the display for this project. Give the inside assembly a little wiggle to break it loose from the foam pads inside, and remove it from the front cover. Take care not to lose the 2 stems for the front buttons when removing the display from inside. Ours stayed inside the rubber buttons this time around. Next up, we're going to grab a fresh new razor blade to help with the removal of the film and adhesive currently on the display. Easily work the razor blade under the film and work the corner up enough to grab with your fingers. Don't be terribly worried about scratching the display. As long as your blade is kept flat to the surface, it should be perfectly safe. Once you're able to get a hold of the film and start peeling it off, try to pull the film along the length of the display rather than pulling it straight away from the display. And as you get more of the film peeled away, you can use your hand against the PCB as leverage to make a more steady peel and leave a little less adhesive behind on the display. After removing the film, you need to remove every speck of adhesive from the display. I'm going to use a light adhesive remover, dab it onto the surface, and use a razor blade to remove the glue as it lifts. If you use this kind of approach, be sure not to over apply the remover and possibly damage the edges of the LCD display. If you get the liquid over the edge of the LCD display, it can leak in and cause some problems. Now, some displays have been found to have more than one layer of film. A quick check is to plug in the display and power it on. If it's completely blank, you're ready for the next step. The film in the kit has been labeled as to which side will be adhered to the display. You can do a quick check of the display effect by placing the film over your blank display. And we just verified that the background will be our dark color. Make sure your display is totally dust free and peel off layer 1 of the polarizing film. Take care not to remove or scratch the adhesive along with the film. I kind of buggered up one corner of the film on this application, but I think it's going to be okay once everything's completed. Gently lay the film onto the display and use a soft microfiber cloth to push air bubbles to the edges of the display. And if you're not sure, you can pick out the air bubbles underneath the film by the lighter color you see. I'm going to go an extra step and use the folded paper from the packaging to firmly push the film all the way down to the edges. After all that, we've got a little cloudy look around the edge, but I'm pretty sure it's being caused by the protective layer 2 on the polarizing film. We'll do a quick power on check to make sure our colors are correct, and check it out because I'm a child. Also, you can see here that the small defect in the corner of the adhesive is not visible while the display is powered on. Awesome. Now it's time to install the color change film, by far the easiest part of this modification. You can simply lay the film into the display, but there have been some reports that you might get a slight halo effect around the edge due to the foam pads that are inside the cover. So we'll remove those with our fingernail or a little plastic spudger tool. And once again, we'll use the microfiber cloth to wipe the inside of the cluster cover to make sure we don't leave any smudges or specks inside. And apply the film. There is a wider end to the film as it's cut in this kit, and I think that the wider end of the film fits best at the end of the cover where the buttons are, or the left end when it's on the bike. Now I'm going to install the stems for the front buttons into the display. And be sure that as you place the front cover on, that the stems go into the rubber buttons. Give a little wiggle. Once the display is seated into the front cover, you can attach the rear cover and tighten the screws evenly. No need to over tighten these either, just nice and snug. Finally, install the cluster back on the motorcycle and enjoy. I will admit, in straight daylight, adding the blue layer was probably just like a half a step too far, because you can still see it, but if the sun is glaring off of the screen, it gets a little bit harder to see. Definitely not as in your face as black and white would be, but even at noon with the sun beating straight down on the thing, you can see it pretty good. Right now it's lower light, it's like 5:30 in the afternoon. Don't mind the clock, I've been doing some work on the bike, so the battery's been disconnected. And definitely at night, it's got a real stellar blue glow to the letters. I think it's pretty killer. And then having blue on dark blue gauges on a blue bike, come on man, what's not to love? You can't tell I really like the color blue. But anyway, that's it. There's really not a lot to the installation. I'd say probably the most important step is to make sure that everything is really clean. When you're removing the adhesive, make sure you don't have any dust or anything on the LCD, because if you do have anything on there, when you go to lay down your polarizing layer, it's going to create little specks. While some people might not be bothered by that, I will fully admit that that would bug the crap out of me if I looked down and I had little speckles all over my screen. But as always guys, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll catch you next time.